Welcome to the YourTown television program. Again, I'm Jeff Kline, your host for this segment that's sponsored by the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation, where we highlight interesting faculty and student activities at the Naval Postgraduate School in your town, Monterey. Today I've got something for the first time. I actually got a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School who's now out of the Navy, but returned to Monterey to start a second career life. And so his name is Commander Harrison Schramm, United States Navy retired. We'll talk a little bit about what he did in the Navy and what he's doing now and why he moved back to Monterey. Harrison, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I always start shows with learning out a little bit about the people that we have as a guest. So you were reared in the Midwest. Tell me a little bit about that adventure and why you joined the Navy after coming from the Midwest.
So I grew up in Kansas City with my family. And
well, not Kansas City, Kansas or Missouri.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So you're
deal.
a Missourian, so
yeah.
You know that. So you would know that. Yeah, not everyone knows that. No, I grew up on the Kansas side in Shawnee Mission, and I went to school there up through my, up until I was 18. I was in the band. I was a cross country and track runner back then, and those were really of interest to me. And when I started thinking about what I wanted to do, and I spent a lot of time in Boy Scouts too, so I was gone summers. And when I started thinking about what I wanted to do with myself, I just didn't know, but I wanted to do something interesting. And when I was looking through all these things that I could do, I had done well in cross country, and I'd done well on the SATs and ACTs, and so I started getting letters from the Naval Academy. And the way that worked for me is, you get letters and you answer them, and then you get more letters and you answer them, and you go through this process up until this one day. It was in March of '92, right before I graduated high school, and this letter shows up, and it's very much like Willy Wonka and the Golden Ticket. It's here's the letter. It has a plane ticket with it. Check yes to go, check no to stay. And
I just want to say that's the first time I've heard the Naval Academy referred to as Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
No, the ticket, not the institution itself, but the ticket.
Right.
You're sort of like, okay, I've been answering these letters, but now I've got this letter that I have to answer.
Right.
And I remember being very conflicted about it, and my grandfather, who I was very close with, who was a veteran of the Second World War, just sort of said, well, you have to at least say you went.
Sure.
So that was sort of probably not the best reason that you've ever heard, but you have to at least say you went. So
sure.
I went. And I went to the academy and graduated in '96 as an electrical engineer.
So you got your EE degree there.
Yes, I did.
Before we go back from your high school experience, this is the first time I heard that you were in the band. So what did you play in the band?
I played as softly as I could, because the band director liked me because I was good with leadership stuff, but I was a trumpet player and I wasn't really that good. In fact, there was this sort of subterfuge of, gosh, Harrison, you're such a great trumpet player. What we really need you to do is play French horn. Which you stick your fist in the bell of the instrument. So it was okay though.
Well, we share something in common then. I used to play the trumpet. Mine was stolen, I think, by the band director.
Okay.
And so that ended my band days.
I think that was probably a wise choice.
That's exactly right. So you graduated from the academy, and then what did you do in the Navy?
So I started off as a helicopter pilot. I had thought I was going to be in submarines because electrical engineering and nuke power school, that seems like a natural flow. And also I had thought I was not physically qualified because I had some allergy issues. And when the senior year, right before I had to actually ask for what I wanted, I found out from the doctors, hey, you can get a waiver for this. You can go be a pilot if you want to. And to be honest, I saw more of myself in the aviators that I knew, that were faculty there. I saw more of myself following them and having that sort of personality than I did in the other types of people that I was around on faculty. So I chose to do that. And I know you're a retired surface captain, so you're going to probably say something about aviators having a more laissez-faire
oh no, I would
life.
never imply that.
Oh no, you wouldn't imply it. You would just say it. But it was very much the thing about being an aviator is that you have a fixed amount of time to do every task. So you just do everything as efficiently as you possibly can.
I don't think what people realize, and I'm going to brag a little bit about your profession now, is that helicopter pilots at sea land on tiny little moving platforms on the ships themselves that no other pilots faced with before. So it's some of the most challenging things I think you can do as a pilot. And you had a lot of great experiences doing that, but somewhere in your mid-career you decided to come to Naval Postgraduate School to get a degree. Why did you select operations research, for example?
So when I was young and I was in my first squadron, all I wanted to do was fly. And I didn't feel like I had gotten, my money's worth out of my first squadron because I didn't have a rescue, I didn't have anything noteworthy happen. So I moved to Guam. Sarah and I were newly married.
Sarah is your wife?
Yes, Sarah, my wife. And we were newly married, and we just said, well, if we're going to pick up and move to Guam, this is the time to do it.
Sure.
And so I didn't really feel like I got my adventure out of my first squadron tour. I got enough of it in my second squadron tour that
to satisfy
that 2 years on Guam. But I sort of started to have this realization while I was on Guam that I was going to grow up someday. And being a helicopter pilot it's an awesome thing to do. It's a lot of fun and a very worthwhile profession. But I didn't want to do that when I was 45. And that the time to start hedging against that was now. And I had this elaborate plan to go back to Pensacola, be an instructor pilot, and get a degree in the evenings. And my boss at the time, a fellow named Tom Glenn, we're on the flight deck of the USNS Concord out of Guam, and he just said, if you want to go to school, we just send people to school. I mean, if that's what you want, why don't you just ask for it?
Sure.
Which by the way, is a life skill that I picked up from Tom that has served me very well. At some point, you have to ask for what you want.
That's right. Can't guess. You're bringing up a good point. In many cases, I talk to young officers, and the people who actually support those young officers are American people. And it's always a good idea to pair what you're going to study at the postgraduate school with what you're good at, what you're going to benefit the Navy with, and what you might have the potential for a post-Navy career. And that's really what you were doing, right? And that's why you decided to study operations research, or were you told to?
So sort of, kind of, somewhere in the middle. I wanted physics or math, and they came back with operations research. And to be honest, when you go through pilot training or you go through athletics or you go through these different pursuits in your life, you're always surrounded by the natural athletes. Mm-hmm. You're always surrounded, like in pilot training, there was always the guy, I remember his name, but I'm not going to say it here, but there's the guy who could go out drinking at Seville Quarter
just
all
natural,
night,
right?
Sleep, get his minimum amount of time, bottle to throttle, show up, not have studied, get to above averages on the flight. So he was a natural athlete at that. I was a bit surprised when I showed up in operations research that I felt like I was a natural athlete at this, in the sense that I still had to work hard, but I got better miles to the gallon than I did in other things I had done in life up to that point.
So while you were here as a student,
mm-hmm.
What was your thesis research in? What did you do to help the Navy?
So I did thesis research in trying to figure out opinion modeling and sort of sentiment sorts of stuff. I worked with Roberto Shetman and Moshe Kress, and it's a hard problem. I don't really feel like I made very much headway against it. It's hard because the data that supports you can make models, but it's hard because the data doesn't exist, and not only does the data not exist, but there is no path to getting the data.
It can also change rapidly if it's opinion or survey information.
Yeah, and that's
right.
And that's sort of included in that. So that was my one experience with models that have no data and no possibility of data. So I kind of got it out of my system, and I try to stay with things now that have data.
Actually, I think you're being a little bit modest, because that work was foundational for a lot of work that we try to push mathematics and modeling in to see if it's of value or not. And that is both borrowing from the social sciences while at the same time understanding what might be good things for cause and effect. So you graduated, and then you went to, you actually left being a helicopter pilot, went into a specialty called operations research for the Navy, and you went to work for an organization called OpNav N81, which doesn't sound very sexy, but what do they do?
It's not. It's not. So essentially, and I'll let your viewers look up the formal definitions on an org chart somewhere. What they do is they go around the Pentagon and tell people no.
Okay, well that's easy to do.
It's sort of a sad life of loneliness. You know, when you're in the fleet, you think about the people in the Pentagon as being, you know, those guys.
Right.
When you're in the Pentagon, and well, I assume, because I never was in the Pentagon where I wasn't part of 81, but the other organs of the staff look at the analytic organizations as those guys.
Right.
You know, people are like taking papers off their desks when you walk by.
Make sure they don't
have
see
lunch.
anything.
Like,
Sure.
hey,
Right.
can I come in and can we have lunch? No, I'll meet you at the door. It's okay. So yeah, essentially you go around and you tell people no.
Because they haven't proven that they need something.
Well, because the way the system is, it's sort of an adversarial system in which people ask for everything they want, and then there's adjudication that happens, and not everybody gets to have everything they want, and that's you know, that's an assignment that doesn't always come with a lot of high fives and handshakes.
No, because you provide the analytical foundation for what we can and what we need to not buy at certain times in order for future force structures.
Yeah.
So you became deeply involved, you became a specialist in operations research in the Navy, and you also became deeply involved in our professional organizations. Tell me a little about who really influenced you in your profession.
So professional influences. I have to say Don Gaver, number one, far and away.
Dr. Don Gaver,
yes.
National Academy of Engineering,
Yes.
Emeritus faculty at the Operations Research Department in the Naval Postgraduate School.
And probably the toughest person I know.
Yep, absolutely.
Don, you know, working with him, we worked together for about 2 years when I was on faculty. And he has a depth of knowledge and understanding, and he has a mind that's rigorous beyond where I could ever see myself being. But that was a very good partnership, and I learned quite a bit from him. And the thing that I took from him is, and not maliciously, but someone could be up and talking about this brilliant mathematics they had done, and he could ask a question that would be so innocuous, but it would be a thread that would cause the entire thing to unravel. So when I was subsequently at the Pentagon on my last assignment, I remember sitting in briefing rooms thinking, okay, what would Don ask here?
What would Don do?
Yeah. And I have to name a couple other people though. Trip Barber obviously was an influence.
Mr. Trip Barber was a senior executive service inside the Pentagon for many years, our head analyst in the Navy. Yes.
But the person who I have really come to appreciate since I've retired is Robin Bell, who is also a senior executive. Mm-hmm. And I worked more or less directly for Ms. Bell for the last 3 years I was in the Navy. She also has that no-nonsense toughness and tenacity, and she is extremely particular about writing in English. I remember I took and I thought I was pretty good at writing. I remember one occasion I took a draft email response to her, and literally one word survived chop. There was a "the" in the middle of the page that she didn't cross out, and I think it was only so that I would not have been handed a complete and utter defeat.
Well, she's our lead campaign analyst in the service, as well as an excellent communicator. And let's shift to some of your contributions to the professional organizations that we have both internationally and nationally. You belong to two institutions, the Institute for Operations Research and Management Science, a worldwide, very large organization, and the U.S. Military Operations Research Society. Tell us a little bit about your involvement in both those organizations.
And just for interest of completeness, I'm also a member of the American Statistical Association and the Royal Statistical Society.
Oh, great!
But you know, Informs and Moores are two partner organizations. They have a very loose partnership. I started contributing with Moores my second year on faculty here. I was elected to the board of directors. I led an education and professional development meeting at VMI while I was at the Pentagon. I led our inaugural Emerging Techniques special meeting in December of last year, and I also spent a year being vice president of the Military Operations Research Society. Moores is a very good organization. I'm a proponent of it. The constant challenge when you have a group of people who are homogenous in the sense that they're all in the profession of operations research, and that
focused
a lot of the
on
meetings,
the problems,
and that a lot of people just literally can't get through the door because a lot of them are restricted distribution or classified meetings. It's always a challenge to inject new ideas into that process. I think a lot of organizations have that. That's not particular to Moores. Informs, the Institute for Operations Research and Management Science. My favorite event every year is the Informs Analytics conference. It's nerds gone wild with money. I don't know any other way to describe
I share that love of it too. That's exactly right.
I was last year. I had the distinct honor to serve on the Edelman Prize Committee, and that was really a great experience because I got to work. The team that I worked with was from Barco, who make displays, and this was about medical device displays. And the folks that I was working with were from Belgium. I'd never met them before. I met them at Caesar's Palace. They presented me with a box of Godiva chocolates on the spot.
What a great way to do it.
They were just really cool people.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, they were really cool.
Well, tell me, you also have a little publishing area here called the 5-Minute Analyst.
Yep.
We don't have 5 minutes left, but tell me what the 5-Minute Analyst is and tell me one of your favorite stories.
So the 5-Minute Analyst grew out of an email that I sent to a friend who was the puzzler who just retired from his column. And I sent something I'd written to John, and John introduced me to Peter Horner, who's Inform's publisher, and I had a column. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And then about 6 weeks later, Peter writes me back, and he says, okay, I'm ready for your next column. I said, well, I guess this is recurring now. My favorites, I wrote... well, wait, this is a short column that deals with a problem and a potential solution. Yeah, and okay. I try to keep it 500 words written at an accessible level. And so not a lot of math. So I had been forced to watch Downton Abbey, and a lot of the plot lines are recurring in Downton Abbey. So
I'm not going to. Is Sarah going to watch this when you say forced to watch Downton?
No, she knows. She knows. And so I wrote an article called Markov's Abbey, where I fit applied probability models to the characters and the tribulations of Downton Abbey, and that got retweeted by Brendan Coyle, who's the guy who played Mr. Bates. Sure. I thought that was pretty cool.
It is cool.
I've written a lot about Star Wars because Star Wars is fun, and I wrote about the Battle of Hoth, and the way you get the data for that is you watch the movie on a laptop, and you have your children sit next to you, and every time something gets blown up, they just write down what got blown up. And I have this great memory of collecting
and that then you applied attrition models to that particular model to see if you could get the parameters. Yeah. That is unbelievably nerdy.
Yes.
Are you having influence on your children as well to do these things?
I hope so. No, I mean I hope the influence that I'm having on them is if you see something you want to do it. And if other people think it's nerdy, well, that's okay. If it's constructive and it's not hurting anybody,
well, absolutely. And you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, we only have about a minute left, and so tell us what you like most about Monterey. Why did you come back here?
Well, because it's not DC. I like, we have a lot of family and friends, or a lot of friends here. This is kind of where we feel like is our adopted home. And bicycles, for me. I love bicycling.
The trails are great here.
Well, yeah, and 17-mile drive. I mean, how can you not love riding 17-mile drive every day if you want?
And what are you doing as a profession now?
So I'm a principal operations research analyst / statistician. I think statistics is the most useful tool I have in my kit, and I do a lot of coding in R.
Right, which is a computer code.
Yeah, which is a statistical programming language, yeah.
Well, Harrison, thank you very much for being on the show. You represent both the best in our graduates who serve their nation and now have come back to the Monterey area and been a stalwart as citizenry. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us in the YourTown television program. We will have other segments that highlight both the faculty and students at the Naval Postgraduate School, and please join us.